Well, it's the 30th of June, a very wet Tuesday morning. Welcome to your perfect morning starter right here on Channels Television. I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Jeffrey Ozama. Bukola, what are you tracking? Good morning.
Well, it appears a season of reforms. Call it one and you would not be right. President Bola Tinubu has initiated or approved, as you would call it, during the Federal Executive Council, a round of reforms for the National Youth Service Corps, NYSC. And so henceforth, the NYSC may not be the same as you now know it, as part of the reforms indicate that a civilian will now head that institution, while the operations of the NYSC will continue to be managed by the military. This amongst other reforms that were announced after yesterday's Federal Executive Council meeting. Jeffrey.
As a matter of fact, I want to read some of the, I hope that the producer can get this out for us. So some of the things that were stated as far as the reform that the Honorable Minister of Youth Development had written on his official handle on social media. It says some of the landmark reforms will include, at some point the director will put it up for us, a technology-driven call-up process, risk-sensitive deployment to better protect core members, a redesigned 6 weeks orientation program with stronger focus on leadership, entrepreneurship, digital skills, and specialized career streams. Number 4, skill-based primary assignments. This is particularly interesting. Skill-based primary assignments aligned with academic background and career pathway. So an engineer should go to where engineers are needed, bankers should go to where bankers are needed, entrepreneurs should go to entrepreneurial, wherever entrepreneurs are found. Modern governance with civilian operational leadership. So we may not have the lieutenant generals or brigadier generals that is where leading the NYSC anymore, but the military will continue to provide security support, maybe at the camps. Improve camp standards through a national grading and certification system. Because I think you have the last one. I think a new graduation ceremony to replace the POP and redesigned NYSC uniform that reflects professionalism and national pride. It looks good, right? On paper.
Well, looking very good.
Some people are even calling for the scrap of NYSC in general.
And
but rather than scrap, they are saying we can reform it and make it more market-friendly.
Certainly not a scrapping of the NYSC. If you have been through, the National Youth Service Corps scheme in this country and you have experienced another part of Nigeria rather than what you were familiar with in your university days or growing up, you would fully and wholly embrace the NYSC scheme as one that unifies the country and helps you appreciate the beauty of Nigeria and the beauty of the Nigerian people, who are very hospitable and who are very warm and who are very welcoming of visitors to their own location, to their own community. The skill-based reform is rather interesting for those who have, experienced the NYSC prior to this time, would, know that not necessarily all deployments, immediately after the orientation camp are skills-based. Some would have particularly achieved expertise in one area and then they are deployed to a far-flung community to teach. That was my own personal experience, as a core member right after orientation, deployed across water somewhere in former President Jonathan's community in Ogwea to teach in Bayelsa State with no experience of teaching in any way, shape or form. And so I had to go job hunting on my own. So this is particularly exciting for me. Now, I do not quite know, the details will unfold, in the coming days. If this skill-based and the extension of the orientation camp from, I believe, 2 weeks, Jeffrey, to 6 weeks, right, would also mean some form of additional, training for NYSC core members before redeployment. That's another exciting part of the scheme. Would it be a crash course in a particular hands-on skill acquisition scheme to further empower the Nigerian youths and make them able to stand on their own, regardless of whether a job comes through right after exiting the NYSC scheme, such that they're unable to at least earn a living right after the orientation scheme.
Absolutely.
Jeffrey.
So let's also talk about what our eyes, literally the eyes of the entire world is on South Africa right now because of the match and match. Bukola, as a matter of fact, the leader of the match and match, Jacinda, I think that's her name, is literally denying or distancing herself from today's June 30th deadline given by citizens who are fighting illegal or undocumented immigrants in this sense. Now, she said, is the other group, I've forgotten their name, I think it's a Zulu name they call, there's this gentleman, I can't even pronounce his name correctly, so I won't even try for now, who is leading his own march as well, the one who you see where the Zulu regalia leading certain people across the streets of Johannesburg to carry out, their immigration or trying to see how they can, send undocumented immigrants out of their country, which a lot of people have criticized that you may vent and disagree with undocumented immigrants, but there's a government in South Africa that should take responsibility for doing all of this. Well, they had put June the 30th, which is today, as the day that they expect all undocumented immigrants to leave South Africa. Everybody's looking in that direction. Nigeria sent a plane last night it was supposed to land in Joburg at about 9 p.m., leave Joburg at about midnight, and we expect that they should have arrived today. I guess maybe I don't know whether this is arrival or so, but via air peace. So see how people come back. It's about 5 to 6 hours flight. So about 271 Nigerians expected back into the country, and they should have been back by now. But I think this is the previous one, though, where our eyes are at the airports. We're going to touch base with South Africa and Johannesburg and several other places. But you see, for me, I will continue to say this is more of Afrophobia than xenophobia. And I did challenge the gentleman who interviewed that day. I said, I'll take whatever you guys are doing seriously if you go to places like Western Cape, especially Cape Town, because you cannot tell me that all the foreigners that are whites, French, German, the Dutch guys, the people from the United Kingdom, all of them are documented in Cape Town. I don't want to believe that they are all documented. So until you go and carry out your anti-immigration campaign in places like Western Cape, in certain areas, then I'll take you seriously. Else, this is just politics. You have a right to say you don't want undocumented immigrants, but taking laws into your hand, it can lead to something else, Bukola.
Well, we're watching out for the march-on-march protests in South Africa today. And, it's interesting to note that according to reports, it's not just Nigerian nationals and Ghanaian nationals that have exited the country amid this round of borrowing Jeffrey's, nomenclature and Afrophobia. Several thousands of Africans have exited South Africa. And, some of the commentaries coming through have been heartbroken. South Africans may have gotten the feedback from other African nationals about how disheartening this Afrophobia is, about how, their disposition towards other African nationals residing in their country, doing business in their country, and generally pursuing happiness and, a decent life in their country. They have pushed back on the condemnation of their disposition towards other Africans, and saying, look, if they tag us xenophobic, then so be it. They particularly blame Nigerians for being responsible for drugs and crimes in their country, for being responsible for the despondency that some of their children have now descended into, perhaps as a result of relations and societal ills in that particular country. And that is more heartbreaking than anything else, because it then makes you wonder if there is more to this round of Afrophobia than meets the eye. And, you know, watching that report from our South Africa correspondent yesterday also helps you, you know, capture the sentiment of South Africans and how really this should be viewed, not just from one prison, because he did say that, you know, drugs and crime in South Africa is more has to do with other issues, wider, you know, economic issues, than looking at it from the standpoint of, you know, just one particular national of other countries being responsible for it. And so how is the government tackling this? We've also heard President Cyril Ramaphosa asking people, South Africans, to protest peacefully and not take laws into their hands. But does that really address the issue? Because another part of the conversation is that this is more political than, you know, anything else, because there are references to a particular speech in which he did attribute the rate of unemployment to, you know, migration, to many foreign nationals coming to take up jobs in South Africa. So that also shows that indeed it's part of the political sentiment, perhaps to, you know, get more support, you know, from the people. And so there must be more calls, more engagements from the diplomatic community in South Africa, not just to the Nigerian diplomatic community, but other, you know, African diplomatic community generally across board, to engage South Africa, the South African government, on the best way to approach this, because this has resulted, Jeffrey, in greater consequences than you and I can think of. I was reading a report of a Malawian returning to his country, heartbroken because he's leaving 4 children behind. We've heard about Nigerians who have returned home, who have practically abandoned businesses built over a decade and have returned home to start all over. There's nothing more heartbreaking than that, Jeffrey.
It's very disturbing. I'm imagining that if Madiba was alive, he would be squirming on his chair, around his chair, seeing what is going on. It's very heartbreaking. But moving on from that, there's a report that came through, Bukola, about what the United States is now revealing as to, in terms of counterterrorism that was carried out in Nigeria. The U.S. Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Counterterrorism at the National Security Council, Sebastian Gorka, granted an interview, and Bukola, what he said was very, very terrifying, if you will. Let me just read from one of the dailies. A senior United States counterterrorism official claimed that American forces, listen to this, recovered the largest cache of terrorist electronic materials since 9/11 attacks during a recent counterterrorism operation against ISWAP in northeast Nigeria. So that line caught my attention. Largest cache of terrorist electronic material. So if you think that these guys were dealing with in the northwest or northeast, the terrorists in general in Nigeria, it's just a coincidence, it just happenstance, then you'll be in for a shock. But we're happy with the collaboration with the United States. They have better sophistry in terms of weaponry, in terms of everything that has to do with warfare. So they've supported us to make sure that this is curtailed as much as possible. So can you imagine the level of planning that went into the execution of 9/11 that has become somewhat of a pointer to how terrorists can operate successfully, and is a very disturbing history in American story and the global terrorism story around the world, if you will. To say that what was recovered in Nigeria during their counterterrorism, I think about 199 terrorists were killed, is, let me read that word again, recovered the largest cache
since 9/11.
Since 9/11. So comparing it to 9/11 is what is very disturbing. I had to slow down to make sure I'm seeing what I'm reading and be sure that this is in fact a fact. But we thank the American government. We thank everyone who is responsible for making this happen. But we need to keep up the tempo and make sure that we ensure that all that we have, we use it and deploy it to save and rescue our people who are in captivity and ensure it doesn't happen again.
And you know, this throws up the question Kayode always asks about terrorism. Why does Nigeria happen to be a fertile ground for banditry, for terrorism, for kidnapping, for a field of bloodshed. Because if that is the largest cache of electronic materials discovered from terrorists since 9/11, then they're practically saying that Nigeria is the capital of terrorism in the world. Then why does Nigeria happen to be a fertile ground for terrorist operations, for activities? The Minister of Interior did say in the last 12 or 24 hours or so that some Boko Haram and ISWAP commanders were arrested on their way back from, pilgrimage. And so how did they travel and escape the scrutiny of security operatives, of immigration officials? Some are asking, how did they even get their passports in the first place? There must be more resolve. There must be more, interventions by security operatives and, by the government to ensure that these commanders are intercepted, that their funds, their stream of funds, are intercepted as well, such that whatever it is that ensures that the operations go smooth sail is nipped in the bud. Because we commend the resolve of those on the field that are fighting against this. But as I often say, that it would look as if we're tackling the symptoms rather than the root causes. Jeffrey, I recall just 2 weeks ago or thereabout, when we interviewed a security expert, he did say that the recruitment is also part of the problem. When they're recruited with as high as 500,000 naira, and there are no jobs in the states, there are no jobs even in capitals, then it's an easy prey for young persons who are looking for a meaningful means of gainful employment, and then they'll be radicalized.
The conversation for another day. We'll take a break, and when we come back after this break, we'll bring you the daily. Stay with us.